My name is Evelyn Carter, and at 33, I still remember the cold weight of the keys in my hand as I stepped into my new bungalow in Portland. The house smelled faintly of fresh paint, mixed with the sharp scent of air drifting in from the street. Sunlight spilled through the large front windows, spilling onto the polished hardwood floors, casting a golden glow. I let the door swing closed behind me and walked slowly across the living room, my fingertips grazing the smooth surface of the wooden floors. I had just returned from a 2-week business trip. Normally, I would have called my parents to check on the house, but I didn't. They were the only ones with keys, and I trusted them more, at least I thought I did. I didn't shout, didn't panic. Instead, I installed hidden cameras around the house. Little things, tucked neatly behind plants, above shelves, discreetly placed to catch the living room, kitchen, hallway, and bedroom. I wasn't expecting anything bad, but after a conversation with my neighbor a few days ago, I knew I needed proof. You see, my neighbor Carl had mentioned hearing things coming from my house when I was gone. I'd been out of town twice in the past few months, and each time, Carl insisted he heard screaming loud enough that it sounded like someone was hurt. At first, I laughed. Of course, I laughed. How could my house, sitting empty, scream? But something about the way Carl looked at me, half concerned, half bracing for my disbelief, made a tiny seed of worry grow. Carl was in his mid-40s, balding in a stubborn sort of way, always wearing socks with sandals, and obsessively mowing his lawn like it was a professional sport. He was unnervingly kind, the kind of neighbor you don't fully trust because they are almost too nice. I'd barely locked my front door when I saw him standing in his driveway, squinting at me as though I had just fallen from the sky. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied. Keeping it casual, he paused, rubbed the back of his neck, then asked, "Is everything okay at your place?" I blinked. "Yeah, why?" We've been hearing noises from your house at night," he said slowly, carefully. "Screaming, a few nights ago, and before that, too. My wife thought someone was hurt. We almost called the cops." I laughed again, because what else do you do when a neighbor tells you your empty house has been screaming? "That's impossible," I said. "I've been gone for 2 weeks." Carl nodded, as if he were humoring me. "If you say so. Just keep it down next time." And with that, he retreated into his garage, leaving me standing there, bewildered, holding my keys, trying to process the idea that my house might have been screaming in my absence. I went back inside and locked the door behind me, like that would make a difference. The house was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. Too tidy. I walked down the hallway and noticed things that didn't make sense. The mirror was cleaner than I remembered. The floor gleamed like it had been polished professionally. I rarely bothered with that level of cleaning. Then I went upstairs. My bed. My perfectly made bed. Not just picked up, but hotel-made. Corners tucked in, military tight, pillows fluffed, blankets folded just so. And suddenly, the creeping sense of dread I had been ignoring hit me full force. This wasn't fear exactly, it was a quiet, sinking feeling that something was wrong. Something I already knew but didn't want to acknowledge. I called my mom immediately. She picked up on the second ring, her voice cheerful, which made the situation worse. "Hi, sweetheart. How was your trip?" "Fine," I said, trying to keep it calm. "Quick question, were you at my house while I was gone?" "Oh, I stopped by. Watered the plants. You really should have left better instructions for the orchids, by the way." "Had to improvise," she said, laughing lightly. "And did you make my bed?" "Well, someone had to." It was a mess. I exhaled slowly. "Mum, I told you before." "Oh, I didn't touch anything else. Just the bed." And I ran the vacuum, wiped down the counters, and reorganized the spice drawer. 3 containers of paprika, Evelyn. She laughed again. You didn't bring anyone, right? No. Good. Why would I bring anyone? Don't be ridiculous, she replied, the faint edge of defiance in her tone. I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy to confront the subtle chaos of maternal help. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the perfectly made bed and the gleaming floors, trying not to imagine what else she had touched, moved, or cleaned. Later, I went outside to see Carl again. He was in his garage, shuffling boxes like a man preparing for war. I approached slowly. Hey, I said. Hi, he said, glancing up. I rubbed my hands together nervously. Can I ask you something? What exactly did you hear? He looked past me toward the house, then back. There were people, different ones, coming and going. I didn't recognize them when, a few nights ago, around midnight, and the night before, and this has happened before, back in March, and once in early June. Every time you're away, something happens. My stomach sank. March 10th I was in Atlanta. June 2nd I was in Denver. My mom said she watered the plants, nothing more. And yet, there were strangers in my house, screaming, moving, living in my space while I thought it was empty. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't check the locks. I just lay on the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling, trying not to see things I had already imagined. The pattern was unmistakable. Every business trip, every absence, something happened in my house. People coming and going, noises I couldn't explain, my personal space altered. And I was the only one paying for it. The creeping dread was now full-blown fear, tangled with anger and disbelief. To understand how this started, you need to know my family. By family, I mostly mean my parents, my younger sister, and me. One of us has always been different. My parents were hippies, not the cute, artisanal soap type, but real, free-spirited, drum circle, herbal tea hippies. My mom wore boutique shawls and spoke of energy shifts until I was born, and she swapped it all for a job in a shipping office and a suburban house. I was the eldest, which meant I got the bigger room. That was my first mistake. Once my sister turned 5 and decided she wanted a dance studio in her bedroom, which lasted all of 3 weeks, my parents decided I didn't need that extra space. Sharing became the rule. My toys, my books, my bike haul had to be shared. My sister never had to give anything up. The message was clear. I was the one with enough. By the time I bought my own house at 29, a solid 3-bedroom with a little yard, they weren't pleased. Why do you need so much space? My mum asked once. You don't even have a family. I didn't answer. My sister had 2 kids, a house that was too small for them, and every visit my parents came back with fresh complaints about my space. They wanted me to downsize, sell, and give the difference to her. I refused, calmly, firmly, and for a while they stopped talking to me. Then my mum started to thaw. It began innocently enough. She offered to water the plants while I was away, but over time it escalated. First, she tidied a rug. Then she rearranged a framed photo. Then my bed. Each helping hand became more intrusive, until it wasn't help it was taking over. And when I tried to stop it, she smiled and said it was her new hobby: cleaning tutorials, Pinterest inspiration, organization challenges. It all started quietly, subtly, like a tide creeping in. But when Carl mentioned the screaming, the strangers, the noises at night, I realized I had been ignoring the warning signs. So I decided my next business trip, Boise 3 days, would be the test. The house would be empty. My mum would know my schedule. And this time, I would catch the truth. I installed 5 cameras, covering every room, every angle, all cloud-connected and audio-enabled. No one could enter my home without me knowing. I sent her a message the night before I left. Hey, Off to Boise tomorrow. Thanks for watering the plants, but please don't touch anything else while I'm gone. No cleaning, no reorganizing, just the plants. Her reply. I'll try not to clean. You know me. Safe travels. I didn't trust it. Not for a second. And that's when the waiting began. The first night in Boise, I sat in my hotel room with my laptop open, headphones in, staring at the camera feeds like a hawk. At first, nothing happened. The house looked normal, quiet, familiar in a way that should have been comforting. But I didn't relax. I couldn't. The memory of Carl's warnings, the screaming he described, and my mother's obsessive tidying lingered in my mind. By the second evening, around 8 o'clock, movement finally appeared on the screen. The front door opened, and a man stepped inside. Not my mother. Not anyone I knew. Broad shoulders, casual stance, carrying a duffel bag. He walked through the living room with ease, as if he had been there 1,000 times before. Then another figure entered, and another. A woman with a long silver braid carrying a wine bottle, another in boots and a red shawl, and a man with a folding chair. They didn't knock. They didn't say a word. They moved through my house like they owned it. My stomach turned as I watched them spread out across the living room, putting down drinks, unfolding chairs, arranging themselves like this was a planned gathering. I froze. My coffee table, my sofa, my floor. Things I used, touched, lived on. And now, strangers were lounging on my furniture, laughing, talking quietly, lighting candles. On the coffee table, I saw items that made my chest tighten. Adult items. Leather straps, small devices I couldn't identify at first. Someone walked past the bookshelf where my camera was hidden, glanced toward it without curiosity, and kept moving. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking. I wasn't sure whether to call the police or pretend this wasn't happening. But a moment later, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hi, is this Evelyn Carter? Yes, I said, my voice tight. This is Officer Nolan with Portland PD. We're responding to a report of a gathering at your residence tonight. Are you aware of anyone currently using the property? No. I'm in Boise. I haven't given anyone permission to be there, I replied, trying to sound calm. Though my voice was brittle, we've had several individuals express concern after finding surveillance devices in the home. Some were unaware they were being recorded. Your parents are currently present and say they had permission to use the space. You're listed as the homeowner, correct? Yes, no one has permission. I only told my mum she could water the plants. All right. You may be contacted for a formal statement. As of now, you're not in legal trouble. But there may be zoning or licensing issues under review, he said. I hung up, my heart pounding. I didn't speak. I just sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the screen. The chaos, the strangers, the sense of intrusion couldn't unsee it. My mind was spinning, connecting dots I hadn't wanted to see before. Every business trip, every absence, the screams, the strangers, the perfect bed, the 2 clean floors, the rearranged spice drawers. My life quietly invaded while I was hundreds of miles away. 2 days later, I got a message request on Facebook from someone I hadn't heard from in 10 years. One of my mum's old friends, someone who now had grey hair, a poetry blog, and a habit of drinking herbal tea like it was a personality trait. The message was calm, almost apologetic. They didn't know I hadn't given permission. They had been told I was aware and comfortable with the gatherings. They included a link to a website where the events had been organized. No logos, no big branding, just a sleek, minimalist site. Muted colors, gentle fonts, words like freedom through trust and private. Curated gatherings, dates lined up perfectly with my trips. Images unmistakably of my own home, my coffee table, my rug, my refinished wine glass. I sat back, the edges of my sanity fraying. My house, my space, had been co-opted as a venue while I was away, not by strangers entirely, but by people my parents had invited. People I didn't know, people I had never agreed to host. The realization hit me fully. My mother had not just helped or cleaned. She had curated events, invited people, and turned my life into a backdrop for her idea of community. And my father had gone along with it. Every detail, the perfect bed, the tidy floors, the alphabetized spice racks, was part of the illusion of care and hospitality. It wasn't care. It was control, disguised as generosity. I thought about my sister, about my parents' insistence that I downsize, that I share my space. My mother's cleaning hobby, once innocent seeming, was now a precursor, a rehearsal for something far more invasive. The timeline matched my trips perfectly. March, June, now late August. The pattern was undeniable. I called my mum, though I wasn't sure why. Curiosity overpowered fear. "Mum," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "what is happening in my house?" I saw the footage. Silence. Then, almost casually, "Just tell the police you knew." I blinked. "What? I don't understand." "That you gave us permission," she said. "It was just a little gathering, like the old days. Community events. People we trust. It wasn't dangerous. Just tell them it was okay." I felt a cold, sinking dread. "The old days," I whispered. "Mum, you know what I saw? People using my house. Naked people. Things on my coffee table. Bondage gear. What were you doing?" "We can explain," she said softly. "Just not right now." "No, I want to know now," I said, my voice rising. "This isn't a joke. This is my house." Another silence, then my father's voice. "We didn't think you'd understand. So, we didn't give you a chance. You didn't think I'd understand." "Mum, Dad, this isn't understanding. You entered my life without consent. You used my space. You crossed a line. We thought we were helping your sister," my mum said. I laughed bitterly. "Helping her? Without asking me? That's not helping. That's stealing. That's invasion." They tried to justify it. My sister needed support, a bigger house, space for her kids. That somehow made my home available for them, without permission, while I was away. The logic was infuriating. I had tried to help them on my own terms, babysitting trips, money, but they wanted my house, my autonomy, my private life. The fallout was swift and quiet. Legal notices, zoning complaints, licensing violations. The city got involved. The IRS inquired about unreported income from the events. One of the guests sued my parents for emotional distress and breach of privacy. They didn't go to jail, but they paid heavily financially, socially, and emotionally. The website was shut down. The network of people my parents had hosted stopped returning calls. And my sister, predictably, blamed me. "I hope you're satisfied," she said over the phone. "They can't help with the mortgage anymore. Dan and I have to move. You're blaming me?" I asked. "I didn't use my house without permission." "They did, yes, but you escalated it," she snapped. "You could have protected them." No, I had protected myself, finally. My house, my space, my boundaries were mine to defend. I sold the house quietly. No posts, no announcements. I hired a real estate agent, packed my belongings, and moved to a smaller, quieter place, far from the chaos. The new house smelled like a new paint and privacy, untouched by anyone else's agenda. No keys under the mat. No copies given. Calls from my parents were ignored. Eventually, they stopped trying. There was no dramatic ending, no shouting match, just a quiet, mutual understanding that this chapter was over. My parents thought I would protect them. I thought they would protect me. Neither of us had been right, and that was the final lesson. Family can overstep in ways you never anticipate, even with love as the pretense. Trust and autonomy, once broken, are difficult to reclaim. I realized, painfully, that my parents had never really asked for my permission. They assumed compliance was the same as consent. That's how I learned to guard my space, my privacy, and my life fiercely. And that's how I came to understand that some people, even those closest to you, will treat your home as if it's theirs if you let them even quietly, subtly under the guise of care. 3 days after the Boise trip, I returned home. Not to my old house, but to the one I had barely begun to feel comfortable in. It was smaller, yes, quieter, yes, but it smelled like new paint and fresh carpet, everything sterile, untouched, mine. I hadn't announced my move. No social media posts, no calls, just a quiet separation from the chaos that had been my home for the past 4 years. I hadn't spoken to my parents since the police call. Their messages were brief, perfunctory. But that day I heard a knock. Slow, hesitant. I walked to the door, keys in hand, and opened it. My mother and father were standing there, 2 figures pretending calm, but exhaustion showed in their eyes. They weren't angry. They weren't defensive. They were. Careful, you didn't have to escalate it, my mother said immediately. I didn't escalate anything, I replied, stepping aside so they could enter. One look around, and they understood. The house smelled like fresh paint, like privacy, like no one else had ever set foot inside. It's smaller, my father said. Not a complaint, just an observation. I like it, I said. Simple. We could have handled this as a family, my mother said again. Yes, you could have, I replied, by asking me first, by respecting my home. You didn't. They didn't respond. My father leaned back in a chair, folding his hands. My mother stayed near the door. I could see the exhaustion, the tiny cracks in their carefully maintained composure. We were trying to help your sister, my mother finally said. She needed support. She needed a bigger house. I understand she needed help, I said, but you didn't need to use my house without asking me. That is not help. That is taking. My father nodded slowly. People know us here. Your house was neutral. Yours was private. It was perfect for the gatherings. Neutral, I repeated. Neutral is not a synonym for permission. Silence. They both looked away. I realized, finally, that they had no argument left. No defense strong enough to justify invading my life under the guise of support. After a long pause, I asked the question I had been holding back. Mum, how long has this been going on? She exhaled, and for a moment I thought she might cry. Instead, she smiled faintly, like someone remembering something nostalgic but inappropriate. Since your sister upgraded her house, she said softly. It started small. Watering plants, tidying, folding laundry. Then it escalated. I didn't think you'd understand, but I am your child, I said, my voice rising. I am supposed to understand. I needed to know. Consent is not optional, Mom. You had it in your head that I would automatically say yes. Yes, she admitted. We assumed. And you were wrong, I said. The room went quiet. Not the quiet of anger or shouting, but the kind of quiet that follows realization, when people know they have lost something important. Later, I received a message from one of my mother's old friends, the one I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. They apologized for the confusion, explained that they were told I had given permission, and provided the link to the website used to organize the events. I clicked it, and my stomach dropped. The site was clean, sterile, minimalist. A calendar of events, suggested donations. Dates lined up perfectly with my trips. Images of my home, my furniture, my rug, my coffee table. Every photo unmistakably mine. They hadn't borrowed my house. They had featured it. It was overwhelming. Every trip I had taken, every absence, the strange noises, the screaming Carl had mentioned, the rearranged spice drawers, the tidy beds, all of it made sense now. They weren't innocent acts of care. They were rehearsals for public events, turning my home into a venue for people I didn't know. I realized that my mother's insistence on tidiness, on rearranging, wasn't just about her hobby. It was about control, about creating an environment where strangers could feel welcome, where the house looked and felt perfect for guests without ever asking me, and my father had gone along with it. He had enabled it. My home, my sanctuary, had been co-opted. I sat with a website open for hours, scrolling through images, dates, and descriptions. The organization behind it was meticulous. Private, curated events, every detail thought out. Safety rules, guest lists, instructions for hosts, donations, fees, everything carefully designed, and all of it connected to my house, my space. My life, it was then I realized something else. My parents had been doing this for months, maybe years. The timeline matched every business trip. March, June, late August. Every absence coincided with one of their gatherings. I wasn't just a passive victim, I had been unknowingly complicit, trusting that my house was empty, only to find that it never had been. I needed closure. I needed to confront my parents with the full truth. I scheduled a call with them, but before I could dial, they showed up at my door. No warning, no text, just knocking. I opened it and faced them directly. "You didn't have to escalate it," my mother said again, almost rehearsed. "I didn't escalate it," I said, firmly. "You did. You used my house, without permission. You turned it into a venue for people I don't know. They tried to justify. My sister needed help. The house was neutral. People trusted them. But none of it mattered. None of it excused the violation of my boundaries. The conversation was long, quiet, tense. No yelling. No doors slammed. Just words spoken carefully, each side trying to navigate the reality that trust had been broken. My parents assumed I would comply. I assumed they would respect me. Both assumptions were wrong. Afterward, they left. No dramatic exit. No apologies. Just quiet, the understanding that something had ended. My parents thought I would protect them. I thought they would protect me. Both of us had been wrong. I sold my old house quietly, moved into the new one, and finally felt a sense of autonomy I hadn't experienced in years. No voicemails returned, no calls answered, just peace. The fallout was quiet. Legal notices, zoning complaints, licensing violations. The city and IRS got involved. Guests sued for emotional distress and breach of privacy. The website was shut down. Social connections evaporated. The network my parents had curated vanished. My sister called once, blaming me. "They can't help with the mortgage anymore. Dan and I have to move." "No," I said. "They used my house without asking. I didn't make this happen. I just finally said no." Eventually, it was over. There was no grand reconciliation, no shouting matches, no dramatic confrontations. Just a quiet understanding that some boundaries, once crossed, cannot be ignored, and that trust, once broken, must be rebuilt carefully, or not at all. I learned that protecting your space, your life, and your autonomy is essential, even from those you love most. Family may overstep, even with the best intentions, but boundaries are not optional. Respect is not optional. Consent is not optional. And for the first time, I felt like I could breathe, like I was in control of my life, my home, and my future. Life in the new house was quiet. Too quiet at first, almost unnerving. There were no surprise visits, no uninvited guests, no strange footsteps in the hall at midnight. I woke up to my own alarm, brewed my own coffee, and walked my own floors. For the first time in years, I felt like this was truly my space, my home, my rules. But peace came with an echo of unease. I thought about my parents, my sister, the network of friends, the secret gatherings. People I hadn't known had walked through my home as easily as I walked through my living room, making themselves comfortable, touching what was mine. The thought made my stomach churn even now, weeks later. I wondered how long they had been doing it. How many trips, how many nights of silence, of screams I hadn't heard. I didn't dwell too long. I had learned that obsessing over the past was a trap. I focused instead on small routines, grounding myself. Grocery runs, folding my own laundry, watering the orchids by the window. Simple, mundane things. Each one a declaration. This is mine. I controlled this space. The house felt good. It smelled of fresh paint, warm wood, and solitude. The walls, freshly painted a soft beige, no longer carried the residue of other people's chaos. I unpacked slowly, leaving some boxes untouched for weeks. I wanted time to settle, to breathe, to feel safe in my own home. One afternoon, a few weeks after the move, my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer. It was my sister. "I hope you're satisfied," she said immediately. I paused. Her tone was sharp, but quieter than before. Less angry, more resigned. "I didn't do anything wrong," I said. Calm, firm. "You could have handled it differently," she said. "You could have protected us, Mom and Dad. They're struggling because of this." "No," I said. "They are struggling because they chose to overstep. They used my house without asking. That's not my fault. That's theirs." She was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, I guess, "We learned something." "Me too," I said. "I learned that my home is mine. And my parents, they thought I would protect them. I thought they would protect me. Both assumptions were wrong." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. That was enough. We didn't reconcile fully, but we acknowledged reality. That was all either of us could do. I sold the old house quietly, the one my parents had used. No posts, no social media updates, no announcements. The sale was handled by an agent I barely knew. I didn't want attention. I just wanted the past closed, a clean slate. The fallout had been significant. Legal notices, zoning complaints, licensing violations, IRS inquiries. The website was shut down, and the social network my parents had built quietly disbanded. People stopped calling. People stopped inviting them to events. The network they had curated vanished, leaving only silence behind. I realized then that some forms of help, no matter how well-intentioned, are not help at all if they ignore consent. My parents had believed they were acting in the name of generosity, of support, of family. But in reality, they had been using me, my home, and my trust. That understanding hurt, but it also freed me. Over the next few months, I settled into a new rhythm. I still worked long hours, still traveled frequently for consulting projects. But now, I knew I could leave my home and return to a sanctuary that belonged entirely to me. No hidden agendas, no secret gatherings, no manipulations disguised as help. Sometimes I thought about my parents. I wondered if they regretted their choices. I wondered if they understood how deeply they had violated my trust. But I never asked. Some answers, I realized, didn't matter anymore. The important thing was that I had reclaimed my space, my privacy, and my autonomy. I also thought about boundaries. How easily they can be crossed, even by those we love. How important it is to state them clearly, to enforce them firmly, and to never assume that love alone guarantees respect. I had learned that lesson in the most extreme way possible, but I had learned it nonetheless. There were moments, of course, when I missed my old house. The sunlight in the living room, the wide windows, the quiet backyard. But I also knew that memories aren't bound to walls. I carried the lessons, the awareness, and the autonomy with me. Those things could not be taken. Not by my parents, not by strangers, not by anyone. One evening, as the sun set over the new neighborhood, I sat on the edge of my bed. The bed I had made myself. My Wayand breathed deeply. The air smelled faintly of lavender from a candle I had lit. I looked around at the tidy but lived-in space, and I realized I was finally comfortable. Free, no screaming, no strangers, no hidden agendas. Just me, my home, and the quiet assurance that my space was mine alone. I had built walls around my privacy, not out of paranoia, but necessity, and I would never compromise them again. My parents tried once or twice to contact me afterward. I ignored the calls. No explanations, no apologies. Nothing I could hear from them would undo the choices they had made, or the way they had treated my home. Eventually, they stopped trying. I didn't feel anger or resentment, just relief. The story ended quietly. No dramatic confrontations, no public declarations. Just closure, a sale, a move, and the firm reclaiming of my life. My sister eventually moved. My parents continued their lives, likely repeating old patterns with new venues, but I was removed from it. I had my own world now, one that I controlled fully, and that was enough. Some people said I overreacted. Others said I hadn't reacted strongly enough. But to me, none of that mattered. I had taken back what was mine, my space, my life, my trust. In the end, that was the only thing that counted. I learned that family, love, and intentions do not excuse violations. Boundaries matter. Consent matters. Trust is fragile, and autonomy is essential. I will never forget the experience. I will never let it happen again. But I also learned that life can continue quietly after chaos. That safety, privacy, and personal control are not privileges. They are rights. So, that's how it ended. No fireworks, no shouting matches, just quiet understanding. My parents thought I would protect them. I thought they would protect me. We were both wrong, and we were both right in our own ways. And now, I am home.